Ladies and gentlemen, how we doing? Welcome to the Ripper Podcast. Coming to you now, obviously, a lot of heavy hearts waking up this morning. Some people excited, um, some people optimistic, but others disappointed and struck by the actions. I I don't really talk about this a lot normally, especially on the podcast, but I encourage those disappointed to accept the answer and accept the situation that we're in and just move forward. I think it'll be okay. I hope it'll be okay. Um, for those who, I think that's just the right thing to do. And for those who, you know, are happy with the results, congratulations. Um, it's your own right to believe what you want to believe and understand, but we all know the situation I'm talking about, the specifics that are behind it. Something that so many people are so divided on, one way you go or one way you don't. Um, but I encourage everybody to seek optimism as I try to do myself, struggling with the situation myself. Um, I encourage you to seek optimism. It's a long road ahead. But there's light at the end of the tunnel no matter what. No matter what. Um, that situation is difficult to understand, but the situation is also why haven't the Dallas Cowboys fired Mike McCarthy? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 52 of the Ripper Podcast. Let's get into this thing. Good afternoon, and welcome to episode 36 of the Ripper Podcast.
Look, I'm not saying you should play college football till you're 28 years old, but it does make for an entertaining story and a good quarterback.
How we doing, y'all? Welcome to episode 52 of the Ripper Podcast. Hope you enjoyed that one. It's Wednesday, November 6th, 2024, episode 52. Like we talked about last week, on the road to 100 on the second half of it. Elsen's going to join me in a little bit. We got a pretty sophisticated, simple, straightforward episode. We're going to talk a little preview, obviously our Wednesday preview episode today. One game of our area high school football. That is Belleville. We'll talk about that to get it started. And then we'll get into the hoops coverage. It's Wednesday, so we'll talk about some basketball. Bucks, Badgers, Marquette, UW Milwaukee, and my Panthers. Then we'll get into some college football. I'll reveal my top 25. We'll talk some of the upcoming big games here coming up on Saturday. Into some NFL, fantasy football, the trade deadline, big trade deadline. That is partially what that, cold opening, if you would, was specified at, talk about some of the big trades, talk about winners and losers of that, and then we'll make our Sunday picks, and we're out of here right after that. So nice, even, easy episode to go today on this Wednesday, November 6th, day after trade deadline day. Biggest trade deadline in history, one that was arguably one of the most important in history of the NFL, history of America. So there you go. Let's get to NFL, or Friday Night Lights Week 3 preview. There's one game. There's one game for us. 33-15 records so far isn't too bad. I'll take that, no doubt about it. Belleville, look, this is a team we've talked about before. They probably should not have made the playoffs. Most years they don't make the playoffs. Just under that 500 threshold that is considered how you make the playoffs and how you don't. Depends on the year. This year a little bit different. Whether or not WIA got the seeding wrong, that's up for your own determination. But Belleville team, no matter how you feel about it, Belleville just barely squeaks into this one. Um, but here they are, round 3, still alive. Um, they got a game here against Lancaster, who's a good football team. Lancaster, don't get me wrong, they're a good football team, but not exactly a team you expect to be facing in round 3 of the playoffs. And that's as Belleville. You know, Belleville knocked off number 1 seed Cambridge. They beat Marshall last week. So already a couple upset. Every time they win a game, it's going to be an upset. But this is a winnable game for Belleville to keep it moving into level 4, which is obviously the neutral site game. But you know, Lancaster, a team, they're a good team. They're good at both sides of the football. They can run, they can pass. But this is a Belleville team that you would imagine has a pretty fighting shot. They're hot. They got hot the second half of the regular season, and now they've won 2 playoff games coming in this game against Lancaster. I think momentum is riding with the Wildcats. We're gonna take them. It's hard not to bet against the local Belleville team. We're gonna take the Belleville Wildcats to win this game over Lancaster, and continue their Cinderella story. But this is undoubtedly a game you're optimistic about if you're Belleville, a game where you know you expect to be playing a higher level team at level 3. You expect to, you know, have that opponent continuously get better and better. Um, if they win this week, though, they're obviously going to have a tough test with level 4 as they get a team outside of their section or their region. Um, but it's a little different for Belleville as the 8 seed. There, it gets easier. They play the 1 seed. I believe their Marshall was a 5 seed, and now they play Lancaster, which maybe a 3 or 2. I'm not 100% sure. But Belleville on the road, looking good. We're gonna take the Wildcats to win this one, but we'll see. It's gonna be a fun one. Definitely a winnable game, no doubt about it. Let's keep her moving here. Right into another graphic. Let's talk some hoops. Um, College basketball underway, kicked off over the weekend last week. Talking 4 teams: Badgers, Bucks, Marquette, and my trusty good old Milwaukee Panthers. Bucks, on the other side of kind of these college teams, not off to a good start. I believe they have their 1 win. Questions about Giannis's future in Milwaukee. This is not exactly what you're looking for. You know, uh, rewind back to last year. Midseason, they fired their head coach, brought in Doc Rivers. You don't see that just in sports in general. You don't see a team fire their head coach and then bring in someone new, especially a name like Doc Rivers, who has had success in the league. A lot of times, a team will fire a head coach and hire an interim coach from within their organization instead of bringing someone out new. Bucks obviously a disappointing run in the playoffs a year ago. Honestly, obviously, Giannis was injured and not a part of that. But here we go. You know, Bucks off to a sluggish start. How short of a leash is Doc Rivers on, and how long does this last until we see a change? How long does Giannis remain in Milwaukee? And same with Dame. You know, is this a point where if Giannis goes, does Dame too? Dame's up there in age, so is this a rebuild situation for the Bucks? Who knows? Badgers first win, first game of the year on against Holy Cross. They beat them 85-61. Milwaukee Panthers big win over Lakeside. Can't tell you where they're from, but they beat them 118-62. Massive win for them. And then Marquette against Stony Brook, a win 102-62. Couple of big margins in this one for some of the local college basketball teams. Obviously, it's all building up to the March Madness month and the March Madness season, which is pretty much what defines college basketball for a lot of people, including myself. But we're here. We're going to cover these 3 college basketball teams in addition to our Milwaukee Bucks, and we'll see. It's going to be a fun winter, going to be a fun season, and we are all about it. That's the Ripper Hoops segment here on the Ripper Podcast. That's all we got for the Ripper Hoops segment. And that means we're going into football, which means our trusty guy from Tulsa, Elsen Gratz. Welcome to the show.
Good to be back.
Well, welcome back. Coming off of a tough bye week of midterms, and had you on the show Monday, feeling good. And we're back for round 2 here on Wednesday. Always a pleasure for you to join us. College football weekly preview. We're going to get to my top 25 rankings, which I am always intrigued to share. I will admit my graphic is not updated with this, so I'm going to have to improvise so we can show that. Just give me 1 second. Elson, this is an overall preview. What are we feeling here?
All right, let's see what we got. So, did you see the first overall, I should say, college football playoff rankings? We got the official top 12 teams as of week 10. Did you
Yeah,
check those out and did you take those into account making these rankings?
my rankings were actually completed before they released those.
So they're probably
Um,
copying yours then.
I would assume that the selection committee took a peek at my top 25, and tried to take into account. Although I disagree with some of their placement, but um, I would argue that mine's pretty close to perfect.
Okay, so there's a lot that I like. I think that Notre Dame completely deserves the respect that you're giving them. OSU and Penn State, I still think are some of the best teams in the country. And I like that you're all the way in on Indiana. But if we go down the board a little bit, why is Missouri still in the top 25? How many times do we need to have this conversation, Ethan?
Elson, Missouri, they're hanging on for dear life right now. Obviously at 24, I think they're a two-loss team still. When you look at some of the teams that are, just out, I don't think that they quite have the resume of Missouri. Obviously, I think Missouri's strength of schedule being in the SEC, I think gives them a little bit of credit, but they're hanging on for dear life. They were at 25 last week. They're up to 24 this week.
I do think these are your best rankings yet. And this is a small thing, maybe an unpopular thing. I don't mind that you have Colorado sneaking in at 25. I think they're getting hot at the right time.
Yeah, actually, I think the AP poll has them ranked maybe slightly higher. I think that they're a top 25 team. I think they're, like you said, getting hot, getting some wins that they need. A thing that, just kind of noting on your college football selection committee comments, um, I personally disagree with their placement of Georgia. To me, Georgia's resume isn't strong. You have to consider the aspect of, that Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia. You could throw Texas in there too, how they, teams, it's kind of like a puzzle or a ladder almost, Tennessee beat, certain teams, Alabama beat, it's just a kind of a big collage. And Texas is kind of the lone team where I took them out of that situation, moved them up into that spot over SMU. I think that they deserve that kind of credit. They've been the number one team in the country for a couple weeks, majority of actually the season compared to other teams, including Oregon. And so I feel as they kind of detach themselves from that, I think BYU, SMU are two really good football teams. The BYU right now in the selection committee they have the bye being the projected Big 12 winner, and so they get a bye. And a team like BYU, I don't think anybody had that on their bingo card coming in this season. Also,
Absolutely not. They're carrying this undefeated run deep into the year. And I kind of agree on Georgia. I might not have them as low as 12. I might have them in the top 10, but I think the Bulldogs are a little bit more vulnerable than people are giving them credit for. And we're going to talk about that a little later, deeper into the show.
yeah, there you go. My top 25 rankings always, should be taken as fact just based on um, every reason that we just talked
They're
about.
the correct ones.
Exactly, 100%. Let's get into a week. What week is it now? Week 11?
Yes,
Which is
sir.
crazy to think. I believe most of these teams, a lot of these teams, 8 to 9 win or games already under their belt. So we're looking down to the final quarter of the season, which is crazy to think about. But we're getting down there into the stretch. Let's start in a Big Ten, massive Big Ten game. Michigan team obviously not living up to expectations under Sherrone Moore. They're taking on Indiana, and Kurt Cignetti's got those boys rolling.
I do think that Michigan sitting at 5-4 has a path to victory in this one because as good as Indiana is, I do think they're a team that can be out physical. I think that Michigan could potentially win the trench battle on both sides of the ball. And if the Wolverines rush for 250 yards, they're going to be in it against anyone. But Indiana, they have answers for everything that defenses throw at them. They haven't necessarily had the strongest wins yet this season. They're starting to climb toward that, but they've just won every single game that they've played decisively. I think that their closest game was a couple weeks ago against Washington, where they won by 2 touchdowns or so. They've won games by 3, 4, 5 touchdowns this season. And Curtis Rourke, he just continually is making his case to become a legitimate NFL quarterback, a guy I could see being drafted on early day 3, day 2. He has nothing but answers for the blitz, for pressure, which is essentially what Michigan has. They have an elite defensive line. I think we're going to see another good offensive performance from the Hoosiers. I've got Indy by 10.
There you go, bold prediction. Washington, another a new Big Ten team coming off of their runner-up in the national championship game to the Wolverines, but exactly, they lost Kalen DeBoer to Alabama. New head coach, they've been all right. They've had a couple big wins, but sitting at 5-4, they're going against the Penn State team who lost narrowly to Ohio State, but looking to get their bounce back game.
And that's exactly what this one is going to be about. How does Penn State respond to that really tough, disheartening loss? They just, as good as this Penn State team has been year over year, one of the most consistent programs in the college game, they just can't seem to get over that hump and beat Ohio State to become the best team in the Big Ten. And that's got to be demoralizing. They have a great opportunity to make a statement against a solid Washington team. I think that Penn State is just the more talented roster. Washington is going to have to get Jonah Coleman going. He's their excellent running back. However, they're going to also have to win with the pass game. Penn State has a really good defensive line. They know how to get pressure. This one should go to Penn State. That's why I have them winning by 8. But there is an alley for Washington if the Nittany Lions come out kind of dispirited.
Colorado, newly ranked team taking on Texas Tech, who just had that big upset against Iowa State. It seems like a Big Ten and a big game in the Big 12.
Absolutely, it is. And I'm going to be real. I just don't think that Texas Tech secondary is going to be able to stop Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter. That's a tall task for absolutely any program in the nation. Texas Tech is one of the nation's worst pass defenses. I don't think they're going to get it done. They're going to get theirs with Taj Brooks. They'll score some touchdowns, but I think Colorado wins this one safely. I've got them by 8.
Oklahoma, another team not, in a new conference, not exactly living up to their standards, quarterback issues all season long. A Missouri team you're not very high on. Who gets the job done in this one?
These are just two teams that absolutely need to get right. We see Missouri heading in the wrong direction with a brutal loss against Bama. Oklahoma starting to put up a little bit more offensively. This one could certainly go to either team. I'm going to choose Oklahoma by 1 just because they've kind of been through the fire, whereas it feels like Missouri's been coasting off some high-end talent, squeaking out wins against okay group of 5 teams. I just like the Sooners a little bit more, but it could go either way.
Seems like one of the two big SEC game of the week implications. Bama, LSU, always a long-time SEC rivalry. Both 2-loss teams, potentially college football elimination game. What are we thinking of this one, Elsen?
This one is going to be super fun. For one of these teams to make the college football playoff, I do think that this is a must-have. I don't think there's a route for a 3-loss Alabama or LSU to get in. So this is in large part going to be a decider. It's at Death Valley at night. It's going to be a very fun atmosphere. And I think it comes down to Garrett Nussmeier versus Jalen Milroe, who plays better. And when you look at what LSU has struggled with, they're not great against mobile quarterbacks. Jalen Milroe is an extremely mobile quarterback, very talented with the legs, but he can hit big-time throws downfield with the arms as well, where LSU has struggled. I think Alabama is going to put up a lot of points in this one. I've got him by a touchdown.
That Jalen Milroe, Garrett Nussmeier matchup seems important, obviously, in this game and what implications it has on the college football playoff, but also seems pretty important when it comes April for the draft.
You crushed it. These are the kinds of games that you're watching. You want to see how the guys you're looking at as future NFL starters, how they compete in these back and forth battles when all the lights are on. This could raise draft stock by half a round. And these are two guys we're looking at as early day 2, late round 1. This is going to be a really exciting one to watch for that reason as well.
The other half of the big SEC matchups coming up here on Saturday, Georgia and Ole Miss. Obviously, Georgia, a team ranked higher than what I think they should be, but up there in the top 3, looking like they're poised to. Right now, it seems like give Texas a run in that SEC championship game, but taking on Ole Miss, a team that really has fallen. They had a couple losses, one against Arkansas that many people obviously consider as an upset, but a Georgia team that we were talking about a little bit earlier, not a really good resume so far, but one that they're trying to build for that college football playoff. This seems like one they could get, and it could go in their way.
I think that this is do or die for the Rebels as far as making the college football playoff. If they win this game, I think that they're going to coast with an easy schedule. I do think that a 10-2 Ole Miss team makes it. If they lose, I don't think there's an alley for them to make the college football playoff without a big resume of strong wins, which they just don't have right now. Their backs are against the wall in this one. Jackson Dart, this is an enormous game for him. He's a senior. He knows that this is an NFL tape kind of game. He knows that this is the kind of game that could put him in the first round after a really strong week last week. And for that reason, I am going to pick Ole Miss. It's tough. It's tough to pick against Kirby Smart's defense. I think that could definitely give him fits. But then on the Georgia offensive side of the ball, look at what this Ole Miss defense does well. They are elite up front with Princely Uman and Walter Nolan, two excellent defensive linemen that get pressure. Carson Beck has been abysmal under pressure this season. That's one of the things that's been hurting this Georgia team so much is that he's just struggled to move the ball, and he was so good at that last year. It's been enormous regression. It's going to be a really tough game script if they're pressured, if they can't get into the run and use play action. I've got the Rebels by 1.
That's going to be a fun game to watch. Is that a primetime game as well?
It should be. It needs to be.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Both of those games should be. I'm assuming it's a part of like a double or triple header on ABC or however they do that stuff nowadays. But media, quick question: is media, and it was kind of a big concern last week with the Ohio State Penn State game being at noon. Is the Fox and the ESPNs and some of what they want to do with these TV schedules, is that good for football, specifically college?
I have my concerns. I think it could be done better.
I agree. I think there's its pros and there's its cons. I think the addition, like Fox has I think it's specifically Big Ten, at least it seems like it has been all year long. The Friday night game. I think the Friday night game is a fun addition. I think
I agree.
obviously you have high school football, but having sometimes a high level prime time Friday night college football game isn't bad. And then Saturday, I think that the big noon kickoff game, I think if it's a relatively good game, I think, it should be on, a relatively good game. If they want to have like a game of the week at noon, I think that's fine. But to me, a Penn State Ohio State game should always be prime time, especially in College Station. I mean, with the whiteout and what they do there, I think obviously a Big Ten big time game, which typically has ownership by Fox, is going to become that noon game where all these SEC games, which pretty much have ownership by ESPN and ABC, are going to go in the primetime slot. And that just kind of seems like how they're going. Big Ten also has that 2:30 slot with CBS. So it's all about who has rights to these games. And like I said, I kind of agree with you. I think it's mixed feelings on what it can be and what it can't be.
I wonder where popular opinion stands on the Friday night game because I like it too. You don't put like the best game of the week, obviously, on Friday night, but you have a fun group of 5 game. I like it. I like having some extra stuff to watch.
Absolutely. I mean, it seems like we have all these new no-name schools. I mean, we got games on Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays happening, which is just crazy. I can't imagine like a Saturday to Tuesday turnaround. I'm not sure if that's even possible or how that works out. But also, I mean, it seems like some of these Friday games they'll put on by Fox, they're Big Ten games. They're not horrible.
No, absolutely they're not. And I think that makes it better in a lot of ways. If we're just talking about 2 bottom of the barrel FBS programs going at it, I mean, what's even the point? But I think that their selection of games has been very thoughtful. They've been entertaining, but they haven't really been the marquee games of the week. It
Yeah.
feels like teams have kind of brought it as well on Friday night. We've seen a lot of close, high-scoring contests. It's just been a lot of fun.
Yeah, enjoying it so far. Obviously, the new age of college football with the 12-team playoff and kind of everything that goes with that. Let's get into the pro game. Let's start with some some fantasy football. I think this is one graphic I want to put up, Elson, is the divisional standings because I was doing some research as playoffs start to kind of slowly roll around a couple weeks. We're getting to that point. I was looking into the playoff bracket and kind of the situation that we're in. Most times in fantasy football, especially in the other leagues that I'm in, divisions don't mean anything. Um, in our league, it does. The four divisional winners each get a bye in the first round of the playoffs, and then there is I would call a play-in game in the first round against a mixture of wildcard teams. So only four teams out of the 16 teams um, don't make the playoffs, which is something we might need to revisit over the offseason. But with that being said, winning your division is super important. And for me, being in the North, the North division is extremely stacked. It feels like the NFC North, and so it's going to be tough to win that division. Being 7-2, I feel I'm one of the better teams in the league. I've really liked my team this year. It's going to be tough to do that. Elson sitting at 5-4. It looks like Caden kind of leaving the lay, a game up on you. Looks like you're still probably going to make the playoffs, but looking for that first round bye.
We are hungry for the West Division title. I have mixed feelings about the division structure and the 12 of the teams making the playoff structure. Part of me really likes it because you get the opportunity where maybe a couple of your guys get hurt. Nico Collins, for example, or Christian McCaffrey, for example. And you still have a really strong chance to make the playoffs and get hot at the right time, get your guys healthy. All you have to do is sneak in and then you can make a run. But on the other hand, it feels like it kind of devalues the fantasy managers with a playoff floor, the guys who have never missed the playoffs in a Monroe league before. I have no idea who we could be talking about with that, but I think that there are advantages and disadvantages. Very confident we're going to make the playoffs. We had a Monday night miracle. Kareem Hunt scoring the touchdown on the goal line, walking it off against Tampa Bay, right? And also
Yep.
walking it off against Marcus, putting me ahead at the very last moment. That was a fun win. Definitely stayed up for that one. Picked up a few big guys on the waiver wire. Tyrone Tracy, Cedric Tillman, who's going off in Cleveland. He looks like a wide receiver one in real life, not just in fantasy, but it feels like the league is heating up. It's getting fun.
Yeah, East Division would be lovely to be in that one, especially if I was 1-8 and only 3 games back of the divisional lead. I mean, considering being 1-8 and you still have a chance to get a first round bye at this point in the season is pretty wild. But yeah, I kind of enjoy it. I think it adds an importance to your divisional and how these games are important against your divisional opponents. I also, fantasy football, there's no home field advantage. So there's not really an advantage of being a higher seed. It's just a matter of, whose players show up correctly. And so I feel as the bye provides extra importance just because to me, that's as much home field advantage as you can get. And it's a nice little reward for winning your division.
Fantasy is as wild as the real NFL, maybe more. So having that bye week and not having to worry about getting upset in the first round, it's huge.
Absolutely. I also want to share this, Elson, something that I found and didn't know was real. There's betting spreads in fantasy football. I mean, how are we feeling about these? I mean,
Oh, dude, I hate those. I think they should be done so much better. First of all, I don't love the ESPN projections.
me neither.
I think that there's worse. I think that player to player, they tend to do a pretty good job. And then there are some players where you look at, and for the record, it goes both way on my team. Sometimes I'll see guys where I'm like, wow, that's really high, as well as wow, that's really low. I think they're under projecting them. And then it just they have some guys that seem like they rate them low every single week. And so I don't love the projected scores. Don't even get me started on the what is it called? The win chances that
Win
spike from
probability.
99. You better believe that Marcus had a 99% win chance with Kareem Hunt sitting on the goal line in that one. So we had a 100% win total swing with that. They're kind of fun. I think it would be more fun if it projected them out the entire season instead of just 1 week ahead. Because all
Yeah.
it is the difference between the projected scores, but they're fun to look at sometimes.
Yeah, I think this was kind of interesting because it's like you actually have a line. I mean, all it is just the difference in projections. But I mean, technically, I mean, when you consider it, that's all that betting is. There's just projections, and I would definitely agree that ESPN projections are not always accurate, and it's hard to say, oh, this guy's projected 18, so trade me him for your guy who's projected 18. Well, that's not exactly how it works. Maybe they're playing a better defense than the other guy, or maybe they're just hot, or whatever the situation is, and usually they're not even right anyways. But uh kind of a fun thing to be able to look at. Elson, it looks like you're favored by
Yeah,
46 points.
I'll take my minus 46.
Yeah, sounds like a blowout in that situation. Close game though between Tucker and Casey. I do want to go back a graphic. Let's just see.
I think they're the two worst teams in the league.
Casey's
No,
4-5,
Casey's 4
Tucker's
and
one
5.
and eight. So Casey, big
Tucker would
big
still be
game.
like in this. He'd still be in it for the division if he just hadn't given all the way up.
Right. I mean, considering like if Tucker beats Casey and then Mitchell and I believe that's Keaton, if both of them find a way to lose, I mean, he's 2 games back of the divisional lead. I mean, it pretty much seems like at this rate, I mean, 4-5 is probably going to make the playoffs. 3-6 isn't. I don't. It doesn't look like 3-6 will make it at this point. So if you're four, I mean, the 4-5 teams, that's gonna be an interesting one. We're gonna have to continue to follow that, Elson, and seeing how this all shakes up as we head into playoffs because that seems like it's gonna be kind of the next thing, fantasy football playoffs. So
1 and 8, still competing for the division. Sounds like the AFC.
there you go, there you go. How about that? Let's get into some trade deadline, Elson. Trade deadline, massive trade deadline. Yesterday was probably one of the most important days in our history, not only for the sport but for the country. Um, People got out, they voted, or excuse me, I messed that one up. They traded early, they got out and traded. It was a good day in the football world. Let's talk about some of these. We'll breeze through a couple of them. Houston trading their D tackle Khalil Davis to the 49ers for a 7th round pick. Honestly, never heard of that guy before. A couple other ones. That we'll get to. One I do want to mention, though, the Rams trading Tre'Davious White to the Ravens. I think this is a massive pickup. When we're talking about Tre'Davious White, who was like arguably the best corner in the league just a couple years ago, and they swapped 7th round picks for him, and he's going to the Ravens, where I think I actually love the fit. This is something that I am astonished about.
I think it's a good move for Baltimore. So their defensive line is excellent. The secondary, they've got pieces, but it's held them back a little bit. We especially saw that in that barn burner against Cincinnati where Joe Burrow just had his way with that defense. I don't think that at this point in his career, Tre'Davious White moves the needle. In his 4 games since he returned from tearing his Achilles, I want to say he's around 30 years old, had an ACL tear earlier in his pro career as well. In the 4 games since returning, he's given up 4 touchdowns, a 148 passer rating, and has been flagged 5 times. I just don't think he's the same guy, but I mean, for a 7th-round pick swap, that's a good dart throw for Baltimore. Maybe he's still recovering.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously injuries happen, and a player, he's a guy who's getting a little bit older, but for looking at it from the Cowboys perspective, a team that when we were on our 5th and 6th corners right now, it seems like for a 7th round pick swap, it seems like Tre'Davious White could be an asset. I mean, that's just me.
I agree he's better than what the Cowboys have, although that's not a high bar at the moment.
Anyways, let's keep it moving. Chicago trades running back Khalil Herbert. Zach Moss down surgery, ending his season. So the Bengals need a backup running back, so they go out and get Khalil Herbert for a 7th-round pick. Seems like a win for the Bengals.
I like it. I mean, yeah, for a 7th-rounder, I think Khalil Herbert is one of those running backs that's kind of in the low-end starter cluster where if you're walking into the season with him as your number one, you could do better, but you don't hate it. He was just buried on Chicago's depth chart between Roshan Johnson and DeAndre Swift, who they felt the need to go out and pay a bunch of money for. I still don't understand that one. I think that's an easy pickup, adds a little bit more juice to a running back room that's already solid with Chase Brown, who I have in fantasy. He's looking really good. I'd give this one a B+ as my official trade grade. Oh, and for Tre'Davious White, we'll say a B, and Khalil Davis. Nice trade. 49ers get a rotational run defender. They're beat up on the interior, so that one gets a B+ as well. We can move on to the next one.
Baron Browning from the Broncos to the Cardinals, 6th-round pick. Baron's a younger player who can play linebacker, play edge. I mean, seems like a good player to have.
I really like this one, in all honesty. I'm intrigued that Denver felt like they can move off of him. What Denver is doing so well this season is they're creating pressure by sending blitzes, so I guess maybe that devalues your edge rushers a little bit. Ultimately, the Cardinals get him on the cheap, and yeah, a young, high-potential player. The Cardinals they're looking increasingly competitive. I still don't think that this is a good football team when you factor in the defense, but that's a big add for them. I like it a lot. I'll give that an A minus.
Yeah, I think it's good. I mean, seems like anything that'll help the Cardinals at this point with that defense. I mean, it seems like that's what's kind of holding them back right now, and so it's nice to get that. I do have a question though. Jonathan Gannon, their head coach, wasn't he? Obviously, they were both hired. Him and Shane Steichen were both hired from um, the Eagles, correct? As both
I
of them were
believe so.
coordinators,
Let me
same
check on
year, I believe. Was Jonathan Gannon the defensive coordinator? Or was he the offensive coordinator?
he must have been the offensive coordinator, right? I'm not an
Was
idiot about
was
this.
for some reason I thought Steichen was the offensive, but
No, he was the defensive coordinator.
so why is his defense so bad?
Well, okay, they don't have like any roster talent. The best player on that defense has to be Buda Baker, who,
Yeah.
he's a 30-year-old box safety. They got nobody on the edge. They got not a lot in the linebacker room either. Their corners are practice squad caliber players. But you would expect them to be playing a little bit faster and harder than they are.
Well, it seems like when you hire a defensive head coach, a guy who is the defensive coordinator for a pretty good football team, and your defense is really like the laughing stock of the NFL. I mean, they're not that horrible, but they're just that's definitely what's holding this team back of being really successful. I don't know. Being the defensive coordinator, Jonathan Gannon, being now the head coach, I think I would expect more out of him. And I would say I wasn't super impressed by the hire initially, but to me, it just seems like it's not exactly working out so far. It's something that is kind of going under the radar, I feel like.
You would expect more. I wouldn't expect like a top 10 defense. You also got to note that they lost two of their better edge rushers, BJ Ojolari, a good young player. They're down Bilal Nichols, one of their starting defensive tackles. Dennis Gardeck kind of played that the Baron Browning role. I mean, I think that's Baron Browning is kind of their Dennis Gardeck replacement at the moment. So they're beat up, but they got to be better.
Jonathan Mingo from Carolina going to the Dallas Cowboys for a fourth round pick. We saw them move Deontay Johnson earlier, kind of clearing the way for Xavier Legette, the rookie out of South Carolina, to kind of take over that wide receiver one spot. But Mingo to the Cowboys, I approve.
I think it's all right. I mean, this is a big bodied wide receiver, 6'2, 220, picked in the middle of the second round in 2023. And, pulling that in for a fourth round pick, the Cowboys need wide receiver help. I don't hate it. But the reason I give this trade a C minus is because Mingo has just been really, really bad. 10% career drop rate, which not completely terrible, but that would definitely put him in like the bottom tier of qualified wide receivers. Here's what's really damning to me. Again, 6'2", 220. This is not a guy who separates. This is like a big slot archetype player. 25% career contested catch rate. That's like tiny 5'7", 175-pound slot receiver territory. He just doesn't win tough catches, and he fumbles the football. There's still potential, still a decent athlete, should still, in theory, be able to catch the ball at a high level. I don't know. Dak Prescott's out. It's going to be hard to build chemistry. It's a decent flyer. A fourth-round pick feels a little rich to me.
I would agree with what you're saying. Obviously, that's a lot more than what I know about him, but I know Jerry Jones had a plan. He said going into the trade deadline day that he's got a plan. He's got things he wants to execute. Seems like this is what it was. He mentioned Jonathan Mingo was a guy that they really liked through the draft process and just weren't able to pick up, and they are able to go get him with the fourth round pick. We'll see how it turns out. He's a young guy. I mean, he was drafted, I think, last year, 2 years ago. So, I mean,
2023, yep.
yeah. So, I mean, he's super young. He hasn't been good. Don't get me wrong. He's not been good at all. But he's also been, consider who his quarterback has
He's
been.
been in Carolina. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
the change of scenery is going to get him right. That could definitely happen.
I mean, this guy, to me, he is so far from lost because he's so young and he's been in Carolina. I mean, I do agree with your point. Obviously going to be tough to build that type of relationship. And with Cooper Rush playing, who knows what it's going to look like right away. But I'm really intrigued by this pick. I think it adds a little bit of optimism to the season. And while my hopes still aren't very high, I'm excited to watch a new face.
Good young player to get in the building.
Yeah, I would agree. Jets trading Mike Williams. I think talk was once they brought Devontae Adams in, pretty much Mike Williams was already out the door. But he goes to the Steelers. Steelers get another wide receiver, a position that many people thought that they needed to go get for a fifth rounder.
I don't mind this trade. I gave it a B. I think in this new Pittsburgh Russell Wilson offense that does place more of an emphasis on pushing the ball downfield, I think he adds a little bit more juice. He clearly just wasn't a fit in New York. I still think he's plenty athletic. I still think he can make tough catches. I like this one for Pittsburgh. It feels like Pittsburgh is starting to go all in the right way. I think Pittsburgh is a little different this year than they've been in years past.
I kind of agree with you. I agree with you. Russell Wilson seems to be working out. Question for you though, Mike Williams and Jonathan Mingo, two guys that I think have a similar play style. Bigger guys, they're not going to make that big separation. Obviously, Mike Williams, the veteran, went for a fifth rounder. Jonathan Mingo, young guy, a lot of upside, but has improved a lot for a fourth rounder. You know, don't consider the situations, but who would you rather have for their value?
Oh, for the value, I think I'd have to take Mike Williams just because of
Yeah.
how bad Jonathan Mingo's been. I think when you compare the two guys, there are two big differences. One, Mike Williams has been a 1,000-yard receiver before. I mean, we know that he can catch the football and we know he can make big plays. I also think he's a lot more athletic than Mingo. I think he's a guy who can play on the perimeter as opposed to mainly just in the slot. But there's definitely more intrigue with Mingo. You could still be getting a good player for the future.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Yeah, it seems like Mike Williams is like a one and done, maybe 2 years kind of guy. Mingo
I agree.
seems like there's potential he could be there, 10 years from now if his career works out and he could retire. There's just a lot. The ceiling's a lot higher than where he's at in terms of Mike Williams. Cam Robinson, a guy who I've always been intrigued about. He's never been super great, but I've always kind of been a fan of him. Played in Jacksonville. He gets moved to Minnesota for the Vikings, a conditional fourth round pick. Um, I think this is a good move for the Vikings, a team that lost Christian Darrisaw, but in a situation where they're going to look to try and make a playoff run.
I love it. I mean, I give this trade an A minus. They grabbed a legit starting caliber tackle. Obviously, not the best tackle in the world. He's kind of the standard. He's like the Dalton line of offensive tackles, where if he's your starter, you're fine with that. Not a strength, not a weakness. And what they were running out there with Darisaw recovering was a weakness. We were having this conversation about Minnesota and are they a Super Bowl contender last episode. I
Mhm.
think that this is a really big get for them because if you don't have good blindside protection, when you're going up against really, really good edge rushers that'll just put your quarterback in a blender, I think that is a playoff run killer. I love this.
I think it's a good pick too. Three big trades, kind of the highlights of the trade deadline. Preston Smith, another trade for the Steelers. This one for a seventh rounder. But Preston Smith on the other side, he's kind of been disappointing for the Packers so far this year. But on the other side of TJ Watt, that seems a little scary.
I really, really like this ad, mostly because they're grabbing him for a seventh round pick. Don't get me wrong, he's getting up there in age. He hasn't been good this year. He's only got 3 sacks. 2 of them were against a bad Titans offensive line. 5.8% pressure rate's really rough, one of the lowest of his career. But the reason that Green Bay traded him for so cheap when they're struggling to get pressure, he wanted out. It recently came out that he requested a trade because he wants to play a 3-4 outside linebacker role, basically wants to rush the passer standing up. And it's fascinating that he values it that much when he's going to be the 3 in Pittsburgh behind Alex Highsmith on a talented defensive line. I mean, if you're the Steelers, sure, grab Preston Smith for a 7th round pick. A little bit disappointing for my Packers, though, to only get that as the return.
Yeah, I'd agree. One trade that I think a lot of people could have predicted coming into the trade deadline was Zadarius Smith to the Lions. They get him for a fifth and a sixth. It seems like I said, this is one that was pretty predictable coming into the deadline on Tuesday, but they get the job done.
You say it's predictable because I predicted it. I was ahead of the curve. That's what we'll say. This is an A plus for me. I think this is a huge get for the Lions because unlike Preston Smith, who's been up and down at best this year, Zadarius Smith is still like a legit number 1 type of pass rusher. He's got 5 sacks, a really solid pressure rate. And that's on a Cleveland Browns defense that, I mean, let's face it, they've just kind of been underperforming as a unit this season with the whole offensive situation where they're just not even in position to win games. You go to a true Super Bowl contender like Detroit, he is going to be their best pass rusher. I think we might see Zadarius really turn it on. And this is just another ad for the Lions who feel like a more and more legit team every week. I'm a little scared. Yeah, this gets an A plus.
Zadarius seems like a guy who really does fit the Dan Campbell culture. I think he's going to be a good fit there. Probably the biggest trade of the day, Marshawn Lattimore. Latimer, a guy from the Saints, a Saints team that's really struggling, just fired their head coach in the same week they trade Lattimore. Commanders pick him up. This is a big pickup for the Commanders, a team that looks like they're striving. A third and a fourth gets the job done. Seems like that might be a little hefty.
I think that this is the biggest trade of the deadline by a pretty wide margin. The best player that we saw get moved, and that's why we saw the highest compensation in a late day two pick as well as a fourth. I think that the Commanders just became a much better football team. You look at who they have in the cornerback room, and it's probably the worst in the league. I mean, I think Benjamin St. Juste is still starting for them. And Marshawn Lattimore, I get it. He's been on a bad defense. He's 28 years old. He is starting to get up there in age. He has still been locked down this season. He started every game, I believe, 83 passing yards allowed, no touchdowns, and a 74.4 passer rating. This is still the Marshawn Lattimore that we know and love. He's just been on a terrible New Orleans defense. This is huge for the Commanders. I'm really excited to see him.
Yeah, a little concerning being a divisional rival of the Cowboys, but seems like a pretty good pickup for the Commanders, and he's going to fit well in that Dan Quinn defense. So excited to watch that. Excited to watch all these guys. It's some new faces. We didn't have that, big, first or second round pick compensation guy, but we don't typically see that in a trade deadline in the middle of a season. That's more of an off season situation, but pretty overall a pretty active trade deadline day. A deadline day where these are just what happened yesterday, and there was a handful of trades that happened early. DeAndre Hopkins probably the headliner of that. Devontae Adams as well. So a couple trades early that happened that are not a part of this list. I would say this is one of the more active trade deadlines that we've seen in a long time.
I got to agree. I didn't expect to see a lot after we saw Adams and Cooper and Deontay Johnson and DeAndre Hopkins all get moved. We also saw a couple of rotational defensive players, some edge rushers, some linebackers get moved before this. Honestly, to me, it didn't disappoint. We saw some good players find new fits. We found some guys who clearly need to change the scenery, find new fits. I enjoyed this one. And I think it was a lot of just really solid trades, beneficial on both sides as well.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Let's get into our Sunday picks. Take a look at the graphic and take a look at that scoreboard. Up by 20. It feels good. Um, always, always loving that nice little 20. Elsen, we talked about the potential of getting to 100 points between both of us. Is that still on the table?
100% it is.
Yeah, I feel like we're starting to figure this out. I think the NFL is kind of starting to settle down maybe a little bit where we're able to make some more accurate picks. But let's get into this one. We'll start on Thursday Night Football. We'll preview each of these games as well, but then in turn make our pick. It seems like a pretty big Thursday Night Football game in the AFC. A Bengals team who has been winning some games as of late, kind of making their, after their annual slow start, they're starting to win their games and kind of get back into it. A Ravens team that seems like they're at the top. They're the king of the hill. Can the Bengals get it done?
This is going to be a really fun watch. I mean, we saw what happened last time these teams met. It feels like anytime, no matter how good or bad these teams are, they do turn it on and they play each other. And I think that the result that we saw in the first game makes this even more interesting because it's like we've seen the big Bengals Ravens matchup already. Is this game going to live up to it? I don't think that Cincy is going to be able to get a stop against Baltimore. Last time they played, Cincy kind of just put all the bodies in the box and sent a bunch of pressure and shut down Derrick Henry in the run game, and Lamar Jackson had an MVP type of passing performance. I don't think that the Bengals have enough dudes on defense to get enough stops to win this game because I do think it's going to be Burrow versus the world again from the Bengals offensive perspective. You like some of the stuff that Cincinnati does with the run game. I don't think that they're a terrible rushing offense, but Baltimore is really, really good along the defensive line. It's going to be Burrow under pressure. He's going to be extending plays, fighting for his life. I'm going to pick the Ravens.
Yeah, I think this is a hard one to not take the Ravens in. They're obviously seems like they're the top dog, and for sure the AFC, maybe the NFC, with the exception of the Chiefs. This is just, I mean, they're getting 6 points. Uh, Not that that means anything. It's just underdog or not. Cincinnati's a fun team. I think it seems like they're kind of getting hot. They added Khalil Herbert. Not that that's going to make a huge impact, but it seems like the Bengals find ways to win these types of games as they continue to recover from their slow start every year. I don't know. I don't know. I believe
Bengals
this
might
game.
get theirs.
Yeah, I think this game is in Baltimore, which makes it a little bit more difficult. But I think I'm gonna take one of my underdog picks. I'm gonna go with Cincinnati in this one. I think it's double points. I think it's kind of worth the risk here, being up 20. I think I might as well pile it on.
The Bengals were a kick away last time. Could be more the same.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a phenomenal game either way. Pittsburgh taking on the Commanders, couple of two-loss teams who seem to be rolling. Two teams that maybe not a lot of people were, considering to be at this point coming into the season, but Commanders favored by 3, Elson.
I'm really, really excited to see this one. I feel like we're just continually watching the Commanders get tested against better and better competition, and they're 7-2. They have answered the call pretty much each and every game, and they're going to have to do it again because the Steelers have an excellent defensive line. We just talked about how they added pieces during the deadline, although again, so did the Commanders with Lattimore. I think that Pittsburgh is going to take away the run game. And the run game is so much of what makes the Commanders good. They can put Jaden Daniels in a great position. They can mix in the option attack. They can miss in play action. I think it's going to be really tough for the Commanders to have one of these 35, 40-point offensive performances. I don't think that's what we see. The question is, to me, how legit is this Russell Wilson Steelers offense? I'm still not exactly sure. I like that they have Mike Williams. I still don't know who I'm going to pick for this game, like in my Instagram picks. I don't know who my winner is going to be, but with the underdog boost, I am going to take Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh with the underdog. He's going to go. I'm going to go Washington. I think this is the game at home on their turf. I saw that the Commanders are handing out their own towels to combat the terrible towels of
Ah,
Pittsburgh. That's enough said. I'm going to take Commanders, Jaden Daniels, Dan Quinn. The addition of Marshawn Lattimore, I think, is going to be nice. It's going to be helpful. Not sure how active. I mean, cornerback can't be that difficult to get adjusted to on a new team. I'm going to go with the Commanders in this one. I think it's going to be another really good game. Should be fun to watch. 49ers, a team that coming off of a game against the Cowboys, got their win. I think they had a bye week last week, I do believe. Did they?
who did they play? They didn't beat the Cowboys last week, did they?
No, they played them the week before, but I think they had a bye week past week.
I'm so tired.
Anyways,
I was
who
up too
knows?
late last night. I don't remember.
Who knows? But they take on a Buccaneers team who was this close to getting the job done against the undefeated Chiefs. 49ers favored by 5.5 on the road. Who you taking?
I'm going to take the Niners, but this is by far my least favorite game to pick. CMC's back, or at least he should be. I think that could be a huge needle mover, not just in terms of what it does for the run game, especially with Jordan Mason is questionable right now, but I also think that Purdy is going to be so much more comfortable against, an okay Bucs defensive line. I think that San Francisco is going to be able to move the ball. And then my concern with the Buccaneers, and I don't really have the evidence to back this up, but let's be real. How long can they keep getting away with throwing a bunch of screen passes to Kate Otten? It's one thing for this really low time to throw offense to work with excellent wide receivers like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. It's another thing with the guys they're trotting out there right now. It feels like some regression has to come eventually. So I'm going to pick San Fran, but man, the Bucs are just so frisky. You can feel that Baker Mayfield effect where he just kind of keeps them close in every game. He's going to be pissed after what happened with Kansas City. This is a big-time trap game for the 49ers who need to start stacking up the wins.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to go with the 49ers as well. I think we're just looking at the better team. I think Christian McCaffrey adds just that different dynamic, different element into a team that is a Super Bowl caliber team, but without him, I think they struggle. And for this Buccaneer defense, they're gonna have to find different ways to be able to stop this team. They're a team that wants to blitz. Is that compatible against Christian McCaffrey? I don't know. But I'm gonna go with the 49ers. I think this is gonna be a tough game. I think, like you said, it's a tough game to pick. The points with the Buccaneers at home, I think are going to be interesting, but they played an overtime tough game against the Chiefs a week ago, bad weather game. I'm going to go with the 49ers. Without Chris Godwin, I don't think Mike Evans is back either. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I'm going to go with the Niners in this one. Lions on the road, favored by 3.5 against the Texans team, who just lost to the Jets on Thursday Night Football. Lions, Zadarius Smith in town. Is this an easy one?
I hate saying this as an NFC North fan, but you are not going to catch me betting against Detroit right now. Now, to play devil's advocate for Houston, Nico Collins is back, and that's a big deal. We've seen this Texans offense just really struggle for explosives, have some really rough offensive performances where CJ Stroud is he's just pressing. He's trying to throw guys open when there just aren't guys open. Nico Collins changes that equation entirely.
Yes.
But Detroit, they've been very good against opposing wide receivers. I can't bet against the Lions right now. Like you said, they add Zadarius Smith. Offensively, they feel like a dominant force. They're going to run it at the Texans over and over. And what the Texans do really well is they get to the quarterback, but Jared Goff gets the ball out fast. He knows exactly where he's going against the blitz. I think the Lions get it done.
I think so too. I think it's like you said, very hard to bet against this Lions team right now. They're getting even better with Zadarius Smith coming to town. I think what a statement game this would be though if the Texans can get the job done. I mean, what a game! I believe this is Sunday Night Football. I mean, what prime time? Everyone's watching. The Texans get the job done. I think Nico Collins does provide a huge element to this team. It seems like CJ Stroud just had his hands tied behind his back without anything he can do about it other than just hand the ball off to Joe Mixon, and he's got a guy back that he can throw the ball to. I think this could be a very, very close game, but it's hard to bet against Dan Campbell and those Lions, no doubt about it. Monday Night Football, this is not a double point situation. But Monday Night Football, the 2-6 Dolphins taking on the 500 Ravens, or excuse me, Rams. Rams favored by only a single point. Who are you taking, Elson?
I'm just so frustrated with the Miami situation because we got robbed of watching this Tua Tagovailoa offense. They're fun. They're not elite, but this offense is good. It's an entertaining one to watch. Devon Achane is an outstanding player. Obviously, they have really good wide receivers as well. I think they're going to have a very strong day against a whatever Rams defense. And the Rams offense, on the other hand, we know they can have their moments. Watching what Matthew Stafford does with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nakua, and even Jordan Whittington, who just always seems to make the right play at the right moment. We know what both these teams are capable of, but I think it's close. And for that reason, I am going to go with Miami.
Yeah, with the underdog points, I think this is I we all know, like you said, what the Rams look like when they have Puka Nakua and Cooper Cup both healthy. Puka got ejected in the last game, so
That was
kind
so
of a
bad, by the way. Like that
yeah,
happens every play.
just kind of like his game is early too, so it's like kind of just a tough situation. But I just don't see the Dolphins falling to 2-7 on the year. I don't think that happens. I think one game. First game back for Tua after his head injury. I think it takes a second to get adjusted. The next game, Monday Night Football against the Rams. I think this is going to be a different story. I think we see a little bit more of the Miami Dolphins that we're used to seeing, a playoff team. I think, not saying they're going to make the playoffs this year, but I think they're going to make a run. I think they get closer back to 500. I think they get hot at the right time, considering Tua stays healthy. Devon Achane is very, very good. He's a different player with Tua. Jalen Waddle's a different player with Tua. Tyreek Hill's a different player with Tua. Mike Gesicki's a different player with Tua. The defense is better with Tua. Mike McDaniel calls it a different game with Tua. This is
The
a
kicking is
different
better
team.
with Tua.
Yeah, the punting, they don't punt as much, so the punter's more fresh. This is a
I've heard the
different team
snapping is a
with
big
Tua.
deal with Tua back in the lineup.
Yeah, 100% more confidence, a little bit more zip on that ball, getting back to him. This is a different team with Tua in the lineup, in pads, being the leader of the team like he needs to be. I think that the Dolphins team gets back one game removed from Tua making his return. I really like the Dolphins in this one. This is a tough one though. I mean, this is a pretty straightforward, really close knit game. I think that's gonna be a fun. We got a couple fun games to be watching out for. A couple games though that I think not a lot of people thought or had on their bingo card coming into the season as big ones at week 10 of the season.
Steelers Commanders. There's just no way. Two very pleasant surprises. I guess to kind of end the show, what makes me so excited about Pittsburgh is, I mean, it feels like we've known exactly what the Steelers are in years past. Mike Tomlin and his infamous no losing season streak.
Mhm.
They're gonna go 3 games, 2 games, 1 game above 500. They're gonna sneak into the playoffs. They're gonna probably lose in the wild card, maybe lose in the divisional round. This year, I don't know. It feels like this is a stronger football team with a stronger identity. I'm a little bit nervous about Pittsburgh and the Commanders. We've spent enough time talking about them. One of the most fun teams in the NFL.
I agree with the Steelers. I think there's just something different about them. I think even with Justin Fields as their quarterback. But I think that we didn't really see Russell Wilson live and enrich his or renew his career in Denver after Seattle. But it seems like these last two games that he's been a part of, it seems like he fits the scheme, he fits what he wants. Tomlin in this offense, and I mean Bill O'Brien, I believe, is their offensive coordinator. He's calling great games. I think
I think
Najee
it's
Harris,
Arthur Smith.
Arthur Smith. Yes, I mixed those two up. I'm
I can
sorry. Yeah,
understand why. I totally get it.
Arthur Smith. Yeah, Bill O'Brien, I think's in Alabama or something like that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, Arthur Smith. Yep. I think he's calling really good games. I think this is just Najee Harris is really enlivened with Russell Wilson, and I mean the Steelers added another guy, another weapon on the outside. George Pickens looks really good. I think this is just a situation where you want to run the ball on offense, have a quarterback who can make the play, and let the defense take you home. And the let your defense take your home part has kind of what's been, what's carried Mike Tomlin to his streak of winning seasons. But that quarterback situation, I mean, it's not saying he's Big Ben or whatever he presented, but this is Russell Wilson, a little bit of a different dynamic, and I think this is a really good Steelers team, like you mentioned.
I'm still kind of 1 foot out on the whole Russell Wilson thing because it's burned me before having too much hype for Russ. But man, I think it would be really fun to see him revitalize his career in the black and yellow.
I
Feels
think it'd
like
be
playing with a different hunger. He's throwing the deep ball. They're making the tough grabs. For once, Pittsburgh is an enjoyable team to watch.
Yeah, I think it'd be fun to watch Russell Wilson in the playoffs in the black and yellow playing ball. I think playoff Russell Wilson would be something fun to watch, no doubt about it. Grazie, that's all we got playing today. Thanks for joining us, episode 52 of the Ripper Podcast. Always a fun episode. This is our Wednesday preview. We'll be back next week, Monday, to recap a big sports weekend. Thanks for joining us. That's Elsen Gratz. I'm Ethan and Elsen. Still have a fantastic rest of your week. Enjoy your sports weekend. We'll talk to you.